Yes. Press the button. Yeah.
Okay, hello. Good evening, friends. Probably some of you can come forward here. Okay. Let me start with a small story. Sir. Today, I told my son that I'm meeting someone who built Nasi. He's the one who built Nasi. Then his immediate reaction was, probably he should be amazingly good. As his wife. Instead of Nasi is failing, I'm losing so many times, still a brand value is so intact. So he has to be good. Right? So, friends, very happy to have Amrit Thomas here. Right? So, someone who I looked up to when I was building Telegram because we did a lot of work with US. Right? I never had the opportunity to work with him directly, but I pretty much worked with all the people who used to report to him. Right? So, whatever little I learned on advertising and branding from his team guys. Right? So, some of you have seen Sridhar. Both Sridhar B was here and also uh, Sridhar Radharam, who keeps coming here. Right? So, Amrit Thomas went on to be the global marketing director for
CMO for Diageo.
the CMO for Diageo Europe. And then, I mean, for some of us who think we are done and etc. Right? So, in 2020, he came back to Bangalore, came back to India, and did his diploma in data science, right? After such a high payroll, right? So, in data sciences, in machine learning, etc. He's so passionate about data that he decided to go and join as chief data officer in Zee, where he will drive a lot of the new age media stuff that we see in this country. Right? So, and in fact, before that, he was in Unilever, right? So, you can't have a better person than I'm going to talk us through the way the great brands built, the way the great content gets created, etc. Right? So, very happy to have you here, sir. As I told you, co-create and presidential labs, what we try to do is we want to make the brightest students become entrepreneurs. That's our one-line vision, right? And we pretty much do anything that we can do to make that vision happen. So what you see here and also on the online, who have joined us are some of the brightest youngsters that we can have around here and building some of the great amazing companies. Right? That's pretty much the audience that we are here. So let me start by asking you how important it is for startups to build a brand and what are your suggestions for some of the youngsters who are building brands? Most of them are in deep tech B2B space, but also some of them are in B2C space.
So I think that's a very great question. And building brands should start from day one, thinking about a brand. Why is that? So let me answer it through a set of questions I ask myself and probably answer to you. Where do brands exist? What is a brand? Where does it exist? Brands only exist in the human mind, inside my mind. Even me as a consumer, what I think about a brand is not really accessible to me. Right? Ultimately my choices is reflected by what is in my non-conscious and conscious. Okay? So as a consumer, I'm interested in living my life. I go about living my life. In my life, there are events. I feel thirsty. I feel hungry. Right? I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling happy. I've got friends and they're celebrating something. All these events and occasions, right? Some brand and some product plays a role. Yeah? Product and service is what you are selling as a tangible entity. The wrapper around it, the intangible wrapper around it that only exists in the mind. That simplifies consumer or customer decision making is what a brand is, and it only exists in the mind. Yeah. Now, whether it is B2B, B2C, this thing is the processes and the mechanics might be different. But ultimately, all decisions are emotional because nobody has the time to actually sit back and do detailed benchmarking, understand. Right? In the end, finally, all decisions is a leap of faith. So, as consumer, and customer decision. It's a leap of faith, it's a judgment. What do you mean by leap of faith and judgment? It means your internal memory structures that are not accessible to you are taking the decision and you end rationalizing. So there's a great guru, right? There's a YouTube video of a guy called Rory Sutherland. Right? He says, your brain is like a press office. It is rationalizing and announcing the decision that you've already taken. Right? So the rationalization and the logic that you give why you bought something happens after you've really taken the decision. You're in control. So as a human being, you have the ability to change your decision. Yeah, you have the ability to reevaluate. And whether it is the B2B space or the business to consumer space, people will end up into a reevaluation mode whenever there is a significant change. Let's say the brand, I buy 2-3 brands of either a toothpaste or a cream. Now, and the decision is a combination of what my underlying perceptions are, and when I go into that shopping occasion, what I see. If there is a sudden change, you might pick it up, you might look at it, and you will end up reevaluating it. You might have seen an advertising of what the new change is. You, as a combination of that, you may or may not buy it. So my first submission to you is, all businesses have to be consumer and customer centric, whether they are B2B or B2C. Right? The whole idea of an agile process within a tech entity is about being customer centric, or consumer centric. Consumer to me is end consumer, like all of us. Customer is the B2B company that you're selling. And if you have to be consumer and customer centric, all decisions that they take ultimately are based on the brandedness of what you're selling. What do you stand for? What can I expect? A brand is a promise that you're making, right? And you're communicating through various mediums. Those mediums are different, and how you build a brand is different in the B2B space or B2C space. But ultimately, it is all about a brand. Yeah, it's all about a brand.
See, I mean, we were just talking about Zepto, 10 minutes delivery. In the age where the conversation is going to service levels, right? Knowing that Zepto can't deliver in 10 minutes at the end of product that they deliver. Right? So, don't you think that with the whole, and then one side you have the whole D2C direct to customer hype around, and then we'll start seeing guys like Zepto who are coming and taking over almost all the retail stores to set up their dark warehouses. In the whole chain where the distribution itself is being disrupted, where the promises are moving towards the delivery rather than quality of the product. How do you see things moving there? Do you think even brands having to, the physical products, having to talk about the services and the services of the product, how do you see that transition?
So the way we are, at least I'm beginning to think about it, the world has fundamentally changed post-COVID. Right? We have lots of barriers have been broken. And India's underlying technology infrastructure is now moving in a certain direction. First with UPI, now with ONDC. So the world is getting digitalized around us. Now, as it is getting digitalized, let's keep the consumer at the center of it. And let's think about what does that mean. The first thing is, what does all this digital technology enable as far as me as a receiver of the technology, not all of you as a creator of the service or product. Yeah? Me as a receiver of technology, what is the value this technology is adding to me? Let's understand not the individual value, but broad themes of value. Yeah? So let's take the biggest companies and what are they offering? Yeah? So let's take Google. Right? It's giving me access. So access is one theme. Access to various kinds of things with some kind of promise. Yeah. So Google has got a search promise. I'm making information of the world, right, or accessible to you. Yeah. That's essentially Google's promise. The first theme is, so Zepto is also providing a different kind of access. It's saying I'm giving you access to an item in 10 minutes. Yeah. Now, how, as a a consumer, I might have different kinds of shopping habits. I do a monthly shop, and that's into my habit because it's not only about the shop. It's also we go out as a family, we go out somewhere, we do a shop, we go and watch a movie, we go out for dinner. Each consumer will be different. I'm just giving you one consumer story. So the first theme of value creation, as far as me as a consumer is concerned, digital is giving me access. You can think about anything you can think about. You can think about how that access can be enabled anywhere, anytime. That's the idea of digital. Access is being enabled anywhere, anytime. Okay? The second theme, let's take another big company, right? Instagram or Facebook or let's call it Meta, right? As they're calling it now. What are they doing? They're allowing you to connect, share, right? And the need for connection and sharing has always existed. Yeah, that's why coffee shops existed. That's why pubs existed because it's all about going out. Who, right? Only depressed people, I think, go out to a pub and on their own. Yeah. Sorry for saying that, but that's my stereotype. Yeah. Otherwise, you typically, right? You typically go out to a pub with friends, and it's about connection. Yeah. And all they are doing is they're attempting to make that connection, enable that connection, widen the scope of that connection. Yeah? So that's connection. That's a theme called connection. There could be various forms of connection. Yeah? The third is collaboration. Yeah? You see less of this, but a lot of, let's say, the entire suite around that Microsoft is building its infrastructure is around collaboration, right? Whether it is Teams, whether it is Office, that's built around collaboration and enabling collaboration. And the reality is that if you look at the evolution of us as humanity and the growth of cities, it has all been around people coming together, exchanging ideas, connecting ideas differently, and therefore collaborating. If you read the history of the emergence of coffee shops and pubs, and the growth of cities, it was these serendipitous connections that led to collaboration, that led to innovation. So that's the third stream of value that I, as a receiver of digital, get, which is collaboration. Then there are two other themes. It allows, as a result of this, it deepens my level of engagement with through interactivity, through different kinds of products and services. Yeah, the kind of engagement that I can have in a digitalized book is very different from the kind of engagement that I can have in a paper book. Yeah? So the nature of engagement is changing. And finally, innovation and business models are being enabled. Very different types of innovation and business models are being enabled. Yeah? So this is the sources of value. What we are doing as entrepreneurs are thinking about how to put technology together, how to put different partners within the ecosystem together, to solve an existing barrier which people have not yet recognized. Yeah? And this is what all companies effectively do. MP3 players existed before Apple came on the scene and built its iPod and then built its phone. Phones existed before that, mobile phones existed before that. Yeah? So it's about making those connections differently in a digital world. So I would say don't get carried away by hype, but understand this at first principles. There are sources of value, and there are ways to put together resources to solve problems, to deliver some value. And you have to be clear what is the problem and what is the value. Yeah? If you're clear about what is the problem, what is the value, then you will be clear about what your unit economics should be, what your business model should be, and you will build a startup that is sustainable. Right? That will, and assuming brand, right? The story about brands and the foundation I've given you about brands is a given. You will build your startup in a sustainable manner in the world. The world is digitalizing. The role of retail is changing. Every single thing that we took for granted is morphing. The question is who figures out what that unique twist for the future is. That's the game that we as entrepreneurs are chasing.
Brilliant. Guys, if you have to have any questions, please feel free to jump in. Any part of this one. Just carrying, in fact, what you summarized were there are 4 companies in the world: Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Amazon. Are the 4 companies who dominate all the 4. This one, right? So how do you see Indian companies breaking into that? Right? So one option is build companies that they will acquire. how do you see? I mean, this is one of the holy grail or one of the toughest questions all of us continue to ask is why there is no Google, why there is no Facebook. And in fact, one of the stuff that really makes us happy is Flipkart remained as, unfortunately, government, but at least it remained as Flipkart. Right? So, how do you see, what are the areas in which you really think India can really become number one? What are the areas in which you can?
I think in this construct, you must invite another person, you must invite my boss, right? Because he has a really good vision of how India can reframe this digital universe. Yeah? And India needs a different set of solutions because for us as a country we're an amazing country. We have got an amazing future ahead of us, and this is our moment and this is our time. I truly believe that. And I think we have laid the first building block, and the second building block is on its way. The first building block was actually the first two building blocks, right? The first building block was actually Aadhaar and Universal ID, which took away a lot of the commercial challenges of KYC and systematized it and automated it. So I see Aadhaar as a business utility development and service rather than as a proof of identity. That's my perspective about that because a lot of companies now rely on that as KYC and stuff like that. The second was the way we digitalize the payments infrastructure through UPI. That drove financial inclusion and I think that is the second pillar. The third pillar is actually ONDC, which is then ensuring that any seller anywhere can connect with any consumer anywhere. It is accessible and scalable. That's the vision of ONDC. And India needs this because we are a country of SMEs. We are an entrepreneurial country. Yeah? And our ingenuity, our diversity, our creativity has to be celebrated. I think we should be against any form of I assume this is internal, so any form of centralization. That diversity, because that's who we are as a country, as a nation. And that needs to be celebrated. There is no single solution for all of India. There are many different Indias. You will need high degree of personalization, customization. And this entire SME infrastructure needs to flourish. I think that's the kind of solution India needs. So I think as we think about these solutions, I would urge you to put the Indian ethos and culture at the heart of it, and say what is the construct that we will create for this, to ensure that many ideas, 1,000 ideas, right, or 1,000,000 ideas flourish and bloom, because we benefit by expanding the pie and getting a fair share of the pie rather than constricting the pie and then fighting for a limited share. So we benefit by actually expanding the pie and thinking about how you expand the pie that benefits everybody in this country in a manner that is far more inclusive in this world. And that is truly, to me, in some senses, the subject of our conversation after this. To me, how we must think about the Indian model. Learn from everywhere around us, other countries, other cultures. There might be many different models of entrepreneurial ambition, but let's build a model that really works for India. And to me, the first 3 steps are there. There are a couple of more steps that need to happen that will be in the pipeline that you can work on, because what after ONDC? Right? So you can answer that question. How do you actually work and integrate with ONDC to make it work and make it succeed? Are all really new areas of opportunity.
Okay, in fact, let's get back to what really fascinated about what you have done. Went back and did your diploma, right? Data, right? So probably considering that kind of control at the sensor, China has probably India must be producing largest amount of consumer data, right? So India produces more data. India can island data, and then we must be our most valuable data, which can be used in any country, right? Every part of India will be a miniature farm. considering data is so immensely valuable today and India is producing so much of data, right? How do you think, give me some examples of very interesting business models that you have seen both from your Diageo experience and Zee experience. What are some of the very interesting stuff happening around data? And what kind of startups you will, you envision based on the data?
So so what is data? Yeah. And so to my data science team, I say you need to be you shouldn't be data centric, you should be consumer centric. Yeah. And I have a really interesting story, a very old story, a Bible story, which kind of hopefully you will remember and understand what I'm meaning by it. And then we come to the subject of data. So Birbal was Akbar's minister. He used to be the eyes and ears for Akbar, and he used to. And I don't know whether this story is true, but it just makes for a very interesting story. So he used to go for walks, meet citizenry, interact with citizenry, bring back information to Akbar on how people are doing within Akbar's empire. So one day in one of his walks, Birbal went and he found this man, really searching for a key. A lost key. How many of you heard the story? No one? So he's searching for a lost key, and people got really curious. He was of a curious nature. And he looked at this man, he observed him, and the guy was searching for the key, he was searching very hard. So people looked at the place, it was a well-lit space, he could see what was there. So in a sense, think of it as a data-rich environment. So now Birbal quickly assessed, saying, this guy is searching for something. I don't know what he's searching for. But let me ask him. So he asked him, what are you searching for? He said, I lost my key and I need to find it and therefore I'm searching. So Birbal helped him look again. And then after 2-3 times he tried, he said, he concluded that this place is well lit. If I was to find the key, then I should have found it. If I have not found the key, then it is not here. That's the conclusion we get. And the guy was getting more and more upset because he said, I can't go home because this is the 4th key I've lost. And now if I go home after losing my 4th key, I won't be allowed to enter the house. So I have to find my key. So people decided to ask him, so do you know when you last saw your key? Where do you think you lost it? What's the hypothesis? Yeah. So this guy said, I don't know when I last saw my key, I don't remember. But when I was walking and I walked from there, I heard some kind of noise. Now I don't know. Now if you ask me, maybe it was my key, maybe it was not. I don't know. But since you're asking me, that's the only hypothesis I have. Yeah. So people said, okay, then why are you searching here? Why aren't you searching there? So the guy said, but there is light. This is data rich. So my answer should be here. But the reality is he's lost it there in that darkness, in that data dark environment. Yeah. So that is why you need to be consumer centric. Yeah. One of the challenges of data science, and we are going to be a digital world will be a data rich. You will have all kinds of signals. So the first thing with that is, how do you put the power back into each of our hands? Because it is my data. I have the right to privacy. I have to be rewarded for use of my data. It has to be a fair value exchange. And Apple has led the charge anyway. And everybody will lead the charge because all of us as consumers have the right to our data and must be rewarded. Now the reward may not be monetary, the reward can be in kind. So if you share your demographic data on a site which you go to often, it will improve the performance of recommendation should you want that recommendation. Or you could be somebody who says, no, I don't want you to recommend anything to me. I will search and I will find out myself. That also is fine, should be enabled. And both signals are valuable, The signal of the person who's sharing the data and the signal of the person who's not sharing the data. Because the person who's not sharing the data is telling you the value you're providing me is not good enough. And knowing the value that you're providing not being good enough is another opportunity for you. for a new business model? How big and sizable is this? So think of data as feedback and as signals, right? That is an opportunity for you. Right? In fact, that's how we must live our life, saying everybody who's telling us something about us and giving us feedback is a signal and feedback. Yeah? So, in a data-rich world, you have to be consumer-centric. You must think about this as signals and feedback. And those signals and feedback can be combined in different ways to solve different kinds of problems and models. Yeah? There are many use cases that are developing out there as technologies develop. What's the role of, let's say, NFTs? Yeah? There's a lot of hype around NFTs. But what is the role of an NFT for a, for any, what does NFT fundamentally do? I'm just going to take this one example and give you an example of how to think about technology. Yeah, at least my very personally view, because I think we get carried away with a lot of the hype around it. It's a non-fungible token. Yeah? But fundamentally, it is a way of encrypting and hashing metadata about something. It can be underpinned by smart contracts. Yeah? The technology, therefore, does 2 or 3 things. It facilitates trust amongst unknown actors, right? Through a combination of transparency and the enablement and encryption that prevents hacking and prevents, right, irresponsible use, if you may call it, of that metadata. Yeah? And as opposed to cryptocurrency, which is a fungible token, this is a non-fungible token. Right? It can be traded in marketplaces, but it can't be traded like for like. Right? One cannot be exchanged for other, because the value of one NFT might be different from the value of another NFT. Yeah? So you can, now in a world where trust is fundamentally being destroyed, right? Because that's just become the state of who we are. When trust in institutions, the entire business world runs on trust. Everything runs on trust. Yeah. Right now, I am speaking to you on this. Right, I'm trusting you to be right responsible consumers of my right worldview. Right, not tweeting it and doing something with it which would denigrate my trust. Yeah, everywhere around you there is trust and the need for trust. That is the fundamental lubricant of human society. Yeah, NFT is a mechanism to enable that. Yeah. It is a mechanism to, the other thing that NFT can do is, it can bring physical and digital worlds together in interesting ways. Yeah, by creating concepts around fractional ownership. Because I can break up, I can have a NFT equivalent of a product and create fractional ownership. Now, what can you do with those kinds of fractional ownership? Yeah. So you have to interpret the role a tech plays, and then say, how do I apply it, keeping that consumer in the thing. So think of technology as a resource enablement, yeah, as tools in your hand to solve that fundamental consumer problem, and start interpreting that. Yeah. So for a brand, for example, who would want a piece of a brand? Right? Only someone who's passionate about a brand, who's willing to pay for a brand. So, who would want to buy an RCB NFT? An RCB fan, a passionate fan. It's almost like I'm getting a piece of RCB, which is only mine, or there are only 1,000 such pieces available. Yeah, that is a signal, and such a fan is valuable to RCB. Right? So that's how you need to start thinking about NFTs, and that becomes then a roadmap for innovation, a roadmap for creation.
Any of you have any questions?
Sir, you shouldn't call me sir. Call me Amrit, Atom or Toss. Amrit sir in Punjab.
So Amrit, when I went through your LinkedIn, I saw that you had done the Yari campaign for McDonald's #1. It's an ad which has been there for a very long time. It's been there from when I was a kid, and it's an ad which I really love. Can you tell us the process of how the entire thing went through? Like the starting of how the brainstorming happened to the end. Because even till date, during IPL ads, these are still played and still very famous ads. So can you tell us the whole process of how it went?
So I think so that fundamentally you need to understand, and there is this Kantar model, right, called needs scope. It's a needs and motivation model. Yeah. Pretty much this model, right, even though Kantar might actually disagree, but pretty much this model is 80% similar across categories. The words might be different, the expression might be different. There are these fundamental human needs. Yeah. So all brands must take an expression or a position in one of these spaces. What are the fundamental human needs? At times I want to retreat into myself, right? Be contented, reflect, right? I get into that kind of, think about that mood, right? It happens to you at times when you don't want to mix with people, you want to listen to your favorite music, read your favorite book, right? Reflect in the same, go out for a walk. Those are moments of contentment, reflection, unwinding, relaxing, right? That's that group of moments. There's a group of moments called affiliation. We're social, right? If we are isolated, that is punishment, that is torture. Yeah? So we are social beings, and that's why COVID was so hard on all of us. Because you want to connect beyond your immediate family. Family is important, that connection is important, but you also need connection beyond your immediate family. I don't know what you think about working from home. Working from home is great, but I don't think I can work from home 5 days a week. Yeah. To me, I miss office. I want to come to office, connect with my colleagues, right? Have that water cooler conversation that takes my mind somewhere else, and I can build. So connections become very important. Yeah. Connection, affiliation, bonding, friendship. Then you want to let your hair down, which is a different way of unwinding. It is high energy. Yeah. And then on the other side, I want to reflect. I project an image of being bold and adventurous and a risk taker. I want to project an image of successful or status quo. Or I want to project an image of being knowledgeable, right? Discerning, right? So there are these six or so motivations to meet themes across categories. All brands and any portfolio of brands that you have to fundamentally think about your product or service and how it fits into that space. Yeah? How does it fit? So when we looked at McDowell's #1, looked at the history of McDowell's #1, looked at what we did across years, we realized during some of the years, right, we miss a trick, and that it has to be about, right, and we all have a close bond of friends. Ultimately in life, we might have 1,000 connections on Facebook or LinkedIn. But in life, you right, I don't know who said this, one of the famous sportsmen said it. I think it was Ronaldo. Yeah. But don't blame me if I'm wrong. But he said at the end of your life, if you have one friend, that itself was an achievement. Right? Our view was that you end up having 3, 4, 5 close friends. Right? Those close friends become your second family. Yeah? Because at the pace at which life is evolving, the role that parents could play of mentoring you, that has fundamentally shifted because parents are now having to struggle to keep up. Yeah? So who then mentors you, coaches you, holds your hand as you grow up and seek to navigate the world? It ends up being your friends who understand your work. Yeah? And also there's lots of migration. You're going to different cities, you're not living in the same city, the same community with our parents. So all this drives us need for this family. So there is friends and friendship, and there is this dostana and bonding and yari. Right? And we looked at the symbol of a brand, right? #1, and we said this is your #1 yari. This is your closest group of friends, with whom you sing, celebrate. Right? So what do you do with friends, right? Yes, you have. So the product category role became clear because when you go out with your close friends, you will have a drink. I don't mind you having a coffee as well, but that's fine as long as you're responsible. But you'll have a drink, you will listen to music, you will celebrate, you will discuss some of your closest deep dark secrets, and they will be there for you. So the way you think about a brand and create this wrapper has to start from what your core offering is. Yeah? Your core functional, tangible offering, and take a part of that tangible offering and truth, right? So the core offering is a drink. right? The drink fundamentally creates connections, right? Or creates content. The drink can play multiple roles. For different brands, you take different roles and you create a distinctive. I don't like the word differentiation. You create a distinctive emotional wrapper. Yeah. So number one, Yari became an emotional wrapper, and that's the construct of this. And in each culture, this wrapper and its expression was different. This is almost an Indian expression of, let's say, the Budweiser WhatsApp campaign. Yeah. That's a very American stroke Western expression of the same idea of Yari. So that's the process of this. It's a creative process. It requires you as a brand team to be completely immersed in the consumer environment. You are not your consumer, right? Your life allows you to empathize with the consumer, but living with that consumer, right? Knowing your consumer really well, right, allows you to then work with creative partners to make these connections and be portrayed. That then results in a creative brief, that then results in a campaign, and that's the whole process. And along this process, you have to balance rationality right, because you can't logically think your way. Now, it is easy for me to explain in hindsight. But a lot of this is emotional judgment. A lot of this is trusting the creative director, giving space to the creative director to ideate. Sonal Dabral was a very good friend of mine who led this whole campaign. It was developed by Mudra. That was the agency that worked on this, and they did some pretty fantastic work that I'm proud of. And the team, kudos to the team that worked on it initially. Abhishek Shahwadi, Amarpreet Singh, Anand, right? All of them worked on it and built on it. Khushbu was our comms lead who then took it into music, took it into culture. So it is a lot of things. And everything is about embedding your brand in a cultural conversation. So in this case, we were embedding brand within music and an emotion around Yari and music. Ultimately, brands have to be embedded within cultural conversation and cultural products. And cultural products are content. It is the word that I now use, content. So hopefully that's an interesting story.
Yes, I want you to take two inputs from them. So of course there are great lessons on branding, etc. He didn't forget to remember all that his colleagues who worked on the campaign. That speaks a great about someone, right? So we don't even remember who helped us last one. Right? So, I don't know how old this campaign is. Right? He made sure that even most of the team members were part of this, were remembered. Right? That's the most important thing. I always tell the guys, right? So, you work for your colleagues, not for your idea, not for the company, not for the money. You work for your colleagues, right? And he also spoke about friendship, right? So, I have this theory. As co-founders, if you can look up to each other, right? Even after 4 or 5 years, I think half the job done. Right? Some of us will be successful, we make money, we may not make money. But as long as you can look at your co-founder eye to eye, I think you have done your best. Right? That's a great learning. Thanks, Amrit. So let's, if any of you have, anyway, I'll pass on the mic. I want you guys to give a 1 minute quick intro to what you are doing, probably 2-3 sentences quick intro to the companies that you are building. And of course, if you have any questions, you can also ask him during that time. Let's close this session.
Sure.
So just a follow-up question. How long did the entire campaign take to make?
So, Amrit, I don't remember now, but I always believe that you have to give it the time. There's always pressure to create. Sometimes creativity is not in your control. Creativity is 99% respiration, 1% inspiration. Right? The eureka moment comes after perspiration. Yeah, there is no. Yeah, and it comes at times when you're least expected. And each of us have our own way of unlocking. Yes? And sometimes you have to let go because that's how your brain works, and that's how it happens for creative directors. So it's very challenging. And also the other thing about the creative process is how you work with that person and the team. Because remember, the person who is creating, you're all creators in your own way as entrepreneurs. But a creative director who is creating a campaign is really passionate about their idea. Now, if you don't like the idea, how do you work with them? How do you tell them I don't like it? Because I'm buying the idea. So there is a lot of skill and nuance there. So it has to be given time. Sometimes you can crack it. Sometimes they will come. A creative director will understand your brand and come to you and tell you, saying, here's an idea and you will buy it immediately. It's saying, you didn't brief them, you didn't tell them, they thought when they came to you, you bought it, happened. Sometimes you'll struggle for 9 months, right? Or a year, and you won't crack it. Because, and the challenge is not with the team, and more often than not, the corporate world forces us to blame yourself and the team. The challenge is in the process. And one of the things I've learned from sport is 2 things are important. Focus on the process and the strength of your mind to execute. Right? Because done, all is well, all is well. When you are executing, you have to say all is well. You have done your process. But when you are executing, if you get scared, if you suddenly start questioning yourself, it's challenging. So time, don't think about time frame. Time is money. Time is important. But again, there is no right or wrong answer. There's a shade of gray. How much time you need? You need the time you need, but also don't wait for perfection. So I'm not giving you a straight answer, right? Because I'm saying you have to judge. When is it 70% ready? Because then the balance 30% will happen through iteration. Yeah? So you should be willing to do that. And I think one of the unlocks that CPG companies have not done is, for example, to experiment with content quickly, right? Put out small stories, experiment with small stories quickly, learn what is working, learn what their audience is connecting, and then escalate that. The digital world provides that. Short form videos, right? Provides you the opportunity. But right, because of our way of thinking, we are constrained. So these days there's something called this concept of fast advertising. Now everybody will put a spin on it. You need to continuously engage with content with your consumers, and you therefore need some process which is fast, templatized, quick. But the big ideas may always take time. Those ideas will stand the test of time. Whether it is Amul, whether it is Yari, they will stand the test of time. Whether it is brands like Guinness and Johnny Walker, those ideas take time to develop and time to nurture.
And I'm Nishit from Visible, one of the co-founders along with Abhilash and Dharmani. And what we do at Visible is we provide hyperlocal weather insights to businesses that can use this information to make decisions around the mission critical aspects of their operations. And this can affect how it helps them is it helps improve their margins, improves customer satisfaction, and increases their operational efficiency. So my question to you is like with reference to your universe role. People don't sometimes look at the right place, and it's rather there in front of them, and they're not looking at it. But what if there's like a scenario if you don't know where to do, and what do you do in those kind of situations? Data is there or might be there, but it's not the thing you're looking for. Then what do you do?
It's a great question. I think some of these questions don't have simple answers, right? I think the first question I would go back to principles, which is so there are 2 aspects to it, and which is so here is what is happening in the data world, and I think that's you're alluding to that kind of problem. Right? We have data that is easily accessible because it is being digitized and captured and available in various data sets, whether it's unstructured, structured, fast data, small data, big data, right? Whatever, fast data, small data, big data, small data. And part of the problem is that we are working with what we have access to. My submission as to data science teams is very simple and straightforward. That's great, but you have to put the consumer at the center, and your product is an offering that is trying to address a consumer need, and is trying to create value. That decision is fundamentally largely non-conscious and partly conscious, and that decision is being influenced not just by what the individual consumer thinks, but also the collective around the consumer thinks about it. Any decision that I take is partly what is there in my mind, partly for different categories it varies. What will my friends say? What will my family say? How will this make me look? Right? What do others think about this? That's what the decision-making process is. I think therefore the starting point of knowing where to look is actually what I fundamentally believe, right? Is about understanding consumer decision-making process and putting that at the center. Yeah. I don't know whether it was, I think it was Philip Kotler who said consumer is the king, right? But the meaning of that sentence, I think people still don't understand. Right? What it means to say consumer is truly the king, and we are consumers, yet we are not. Right? So in some categories, the categories that we buy normally, we are consumers of the category, but we are not then reflective of the entire population or even segments of the population. We are one story and one expression. So I would say, therefore, knowing what to look is about that consumer centricity, and then asking yourself that question through first principles. And that thinking is where I think the real unlock for sustainable brands will happen. And that is really important if you want to break the power of scale and money that lots of large brand companies that have built brands have. All they have is the power of scale and power of cumulative knowledge over time. Yeah. If you want to break that, you have to be better at not just mining that unstructured data, but also making this technology connection. Now, what's an advantage for us is, as tech entrepreneurs, is we are more familiar with the technology. We need this business context and brand thinking connecting with that technology. Yeah? That is where the secret sauce and juice will lie. Yeah? And putting that consumer at the center. That's how you will. So there's no straight answer, but working through the principles, you will get to that question. So if it is a specific question, then you can start working towards that answer by saying, okay, right, let's take your example of I'm providing hyper-local weather information. Who is it of value for? Yeah, it's of value for someone who sells ice cream. And what can they do with it? Why is that value for someone who sells ice cream? But maybe they can decide to price ice creams in a certain way. Yeah? But why will I, as a consumer, then pay for that ice cream in a certain manner? Because in a B2B business, you need to go downstream. You need to say, okay, it is valuable to the B2B entity. It should also be valuable to who the B2B entity is selling as a result of the service you provide. You have to complete the chain. That is the complexity of selling to a B2B business where the end use case is the end consumer of the B2B. As opposed to, let's say, Microsoft selling to Zee, right? Which is the end user is also Zee employees. But even then, in Zee employees, we sometimes take employees for granted, yeah, which leads to incomplete adoption of the power of a tool. Yeah.
So that explains why your Ola deal didn't go through. So, if you have questions, we can ask.
But a big news for sports.
They are.
I can tell you on this, when we were doing RCB, we would always lose one game on the range. I became really good at looking at the crowd and say, right, so team composition.
Yes.
We recently sent case, so you want to do match.
Hopefully next year.
Hopefully.
Next year.
Next time.
Yes.
Isala Cup Namade.
Yes. So my name is Shashank, and I'm the co-founder of Suresh. We've co-founded the company Teamana. So speaking of startup owners and co-founders looking at each other eye to eye 4-5 years down the line, there's a very big fundamental problem that a lot of people don't get along with each other, especially in startups. And we've seen the highest rate of failure, and the number one reason being not having the right team. And the same concept can be applied into multiple domains. When we look at startups, we look at entrepreneurs, we look at students, we look at media, and we look at organizations as a whole. Every single place we go into, we go and see that forming a team is a very big challenge, and it is usually done in an intuitive way, essentially as a gut feeling kind of thing. So we decided, okay, why can't we go ahead and try to solve this via software? We went ahead and created an algorithm which leverages psychometric analysis and skill-based matching to help people to make informed decisions as to who they're taking on their team. So that helps them to make the right decisions rather than haphazardly going through something and just taking a feeling-based. So that's about that startup. I had a question, regarding NFTs and things. So Mark Cuban, is actually pretty good, great entrepreneur, has been really good inspiration to me. He said, cryptocurrencies are a scam, and NFTs are a scam because he believes that they're worth only what someone is willing to pay for it, right? And that has obviously gone ahead and hit the crypto market and the NFT market, and there's obviously a lot of memes and everything behind the scenes. What will you say regarding this particular thing?
So the nature of the world is all technology goes through a hype cycle before it matures. Yeah. So at some point in time, all technology, right, have been in some senses, to use your word, I think of it as hype, over, and sometimes it's overhype. So there are degrees. And if you want to be less charitable, you can call it a scam. Yeah. There have also been, in the history of mankind, you have, right, you have always said that because new evolution happens, there is death to the old world. That rarely happens. Death to companies and brands happen, right? But to categories doesn't happen. Just because we had refrigerator, we didn't, the ice industry didn't stop, it became ice cubes, and refrigerators made our ice cubes, and we use ice cubes today, right? Ice blocks still get, in some senses, sold. The opportunity shrank definitely for them. So across industries, right, as audiovisual technology, cinema emerged, radio didn't go away, radio found its niche and its role, right? This is going to happen, right? So I believe that as businesses evolve, right, and as they disrupt old businesses, the old businesses, right, somebody within that old business will find a way to pivot and find their niche. It may not be as big, or it may be extremely small to where they were. That's what happened. But they will find their niche more often than not. So my listening to both, especially this debate around cryptocurrencies and NFTs is, the challenge with currency is that the monetary instrument, the fiat currency, is a government-backed instrument, right? Regulated and needs to be regulated. You can't create an alternative currency, right? Because what is its relationship with fiat currency? So you haven't solved a fundamental problem. You've called it cryptocurrency, you've hyped it up. One of the reasons that each one of these have given themselves 20, 30, 40 years for minting is they're hoping to evolve that. And in the meantime, India said if you want to digitize currency, our existing system through UPI has digitized payments. So what's the role of cryptocurrency? Right, in India. Yeah. So you have to find really what is it that you're solving for, and you will use that. But the underlying technology is blockchain. Cryptocurrency was a use case of blockchain. Yeah. So similarly, you have to say what is the fundament? Why do you have blockchain? Right? What is blockchain enabling? Blockchain is enabling the building of trust and transparency amongst a interconnected flat world. Right? Otherwise, I lived with my community. I trusted people I know physically, and those physical people became market makers because trust was a physical process. If I knew you, I knew your friends and community, I trusted you. There was the basis of trust. The basis of trust would be language, community, non-verbal signals, and it required physical connection. What is the basis of trust in a digital world? That has to be fundamentally solved. Yeah? And that is the purpose of blockchain. I don't see anyone who has taken this view of this world. Right? Because even today, when I'm doing business, we realize that I'm relatively old and old school. But it is easier for us to get work done in a face-to-face meeting than over a Teams call. And the issue is what? The issue is the trust you build in the conversation face-to-face by showing up and the efficiency of that conversation. So, I'm not saying one will replace the other. I'm just giving you a sense that the role of blockchain is that now you find use cases that are relevant to solve for, right? The hype will happen, sure. You will have NFTs and people will buy for $1 million. My dad always said a fool and his money are easily parted. Good luck to them. They know what they're doing. Hopefully, maybe they are more intelligent than me and better than me. I'm sure they are. I'm not commenting on what's happening in that world, right? But I'm also don't get carried away with the hype. Understand what's happening. So sure, there is value in buying something, right? The idea of metaverse is a way of physical enablement in that immersive universe. And the hope is that immersive universe will lead to building of trust, at least in a digital world. And that immersive universe is anyway going to be founded on a blockchain-enabled architecture.
Hi, Amrit. I'm Pallavi, and this is Miss Maya. We are the co-founders of Fond. So you spoke about the importance of emotions, right? Our company and our products are also, they stand on emotions, and our emotions are towards our full friends. We are a personalized pet wellness company that aims in making, the life of pets happier. We want to make their lives happier and healthier. So the primary problem that we noticed was in case of urban pets, the owners are really busy and sometimes they tend to lose out the attention that they require, especially when it comes to their health. And that was another input that veterinarians gave. And from personal experience, that was the main motivation for us. So the products that we built is we have two products mainly. The first one is a smart collar for pets. Can you show that? Yeah. So what this does is it's an activity monitoring device for dogs. It monitors the activity and body temperature of the pet and analyzes the data based on its age, breed, and gender and identifies any abnormalities, takes it through a veterinarian to the pet parent and gives an overall health insight of the pet to the pet parent. Along with that, we have an Amrit device that's inside. It's an automatic pet food dispenser, and both the devices work simultaneously to give the pet parent an overall health and lifestyle picture of the pet. So yeah, that is primarily about our startup, and Vismaya has a few questions for you.
Sure.
Yeah, so you spoke about creating an intangible value around the brand, right? So for us, we usually talk about emotions that pet parents have towards their pet. So how do you, have create a particular boundary which is somewhere in between positivity as well as the negative stuff? So, for example, in our case, some customers may perceive it to be preying on the insecurity of parents not taking care of their pets, or some might see it in a positive way, like okay, we're getting more insightful and very positive insights on the pet's health. So how do we be in the positive space, or how do we put it across?
So you pay me a consulting fee for this. No, I was joking. No, so that's a really good question, right? What is the balance between preying on fear versus positive emotion and therefore positive growth? The reality of life is fear is a bigger motivator because our survival instinct takes it. And that's just how we are wired. We are wired to, on a dark street, when we see something that is long and slim, right? Even if stationary, we will jump because it might be a snake. Yeah. And that's how we survive. If we say, I don't know, if we are logical about it, you will try and pick it up, and then most of us will start getting bitten by snakes. So the answer to that question is I think contextual advertising rather than thinking about one or the other. When you build your brand, what is it that is going to be not right? People will be of different kinds, and again, you need to think about it. You don't have to necessarily do a lot of research, but fundamentally, there are two things that you're solving for. You're solving for me feeling that I'm a good pet parent. That's the relationship that owners have with their pets. Right? They are effectively parents. Pet like dogs and cats are like your family member. I just had a very close friend of mine, the two of them, husband and wife, traveled with their 3 dogs from Mumbai to Calcutta as they were relocating in a camper over 7 days. And their dogs are like their family. And the emotion you want to evoke with them is that that being a good parent is about doing things right, is buying your product and using the product because this is the benefit for the dog, right? And this is your benefit and this is your gift to ensure that a dog who can't speak, right, is taken care of in a manner. Equally, the opportunity of that is saying, right, you can play on fear, but then you play it in certain contexts. Yeah? And you need to think about in what context do you give a message saying, wouldn't you wonder? And there are various ways to play on fear. Yeah? Sometimes by playing on the positive, the fear is unsaid. Yeah? And that is in the creation of your campaign, in creation of what you do, right? That is always true. So if the opposite is always true. So there is a very old search commercial which is saying surf ki kharidne mein bhi samajhdari hai, right? It's a very old campaign where this housewife buys surf because it is not only a great detergent powder, but it is also extremely efficient in the way it helps her wash her and her family's clothes, right? Now, in that this thing, implicitly what I'm saying is I'm actually value for money, but I'm not selling value for money. Yeah, I'm selling a certain benefit and I'm providing a certain value, and I've priced it in a manner where for the value I'm providing, you get many more washes. Yeah. The value for money is a derived takeaway. Okay, so I think as you're creating your reason to exist, I would say it has to be about celebrating the positive. The negative is the context. In your campaign, the context can either be explicitly laid out, or the campaign can be implicitly decoded or implicitly understood. Yeah, because you don't need to, right? Don't need to obviously start with the positive. So you can have a campaign where you can show a pet parent extremely worried, right? That has the dog eating the food, I'm not a good parent, so you can show all that, or you can talk about the relief, or you can talk about somebody's appreciation, saying, why are you so calm, right? And and the relief you have because your dog is taken care of while you're doing something else. Yeah, because the worries is implicitly understood, or somebody else's appreciation of the pet parent, saying you're such a good parent, right? You've ensured even when you're so busy, you're doing X, Y, Z. And all brands are bought, and all brands and products have roles in the context of the consumer. So understanding the context and the largest context is really important. And in some case, and that's why consumer centricity is important. The largest context can be, right, sometimes accentuating the fear. Yeah, and it might require. So there was a very famous brand in China, right, which basically was selling energy drinks, and the way they sold it was through the symbol of being imbalanced. During the day, when you lose energy, you become imbalanced, right? That imbalance shows up in you resting your head on the table or tilting yourself because you're imbalanced. Yeah? The way to correct the balance is have that energy drink. Yeah? Or in Rexona way, right, when we're selling initially creating. So you're in category creation, and you need to think about what is the best route to category creation. Right? It was about saying you smell, so you can smell your armpit, you smell it. And therefore you need a deodorant. Nobody used a deodorant for n number of years, right? But we were now selling and pending deodorant. So how do you create the need for a deodorant when the consumer does not need it? Or assumes he or she does not need it. So your task is one of brand building and category creation. There are two tasks. You're creating a category, and within that category you're building a category.
Yes, I think we don't have good time for questions. Just a quick introduction to the company.
I'm Amrit Thomas, founder of Consumer. So I want to invoke actually 3 core themes which you actually touched upon today. So one is consumer centricity, one is data-driven approach, and third one is the digital shift. Right? So today, consumer data has shifted digital.
right? And it's more and more difficult for business to make sense of this data because data on its own it's nothing. So converting this data into information into insights and finding the trends and signals from this data is what a lot of businesses face as a challenge. In fact, the old version of collecting data, the traditional method of surveys, focus groups, etc., that's like they're dead now. It's too time consuming. It's extremely easy to bias. So when we're looking at this organic consumer data on the web, we found it very difficult to analyze and get that insights at a. So what we built is we built a SaaS platform where just based on some of the inputs you give, so you set up a configuration on what keywords, what categories, what platforms you're looking at. And what we do is we go ahead and analyze this data. We first collect this data and then we initially run our AI engine where we get insights and trends from this data. And we get explained to you in a real time. So that's basically our product. What you've seen actually is that we're able to find market gaps and we're able to find what consumers want but aren't being able to get fulfilled with products in the current market, how it differs from competition. For example, we ran for an F1 game, and we found that the official F1 game actually ranks very poorly with PvP or multiplayer. So the opportunity here in this space would be that building a better multiplayer racing game, even without the license, would probably be the official F1 game. So things like this, along with the trends in the market, is what we've found.
Very interesting.
So hi, this is Anil. I'm founder of Assert. So we redefine career page of the company, meaning any job requirements that you may have, we build in skill tests and allow the job seekers to take up those tests. Right? So we kind of record the whole product or the presentation from the job seeker and present it to recruiters to make a calculated choice.
Good evening, sir. My name is Shrikar. This is standing maybe. My co-founders are Yosha and Pratika. So we started a company called PhysiFed. This came out of a personal problem. Basically, being a sports player myself, I used to face multiple injuries year on year. And then due to injuries, I went to go to physiotherapists, but this never led to successful recoveries. One of the common reasons that I saw was lack of interest because you keep doing same repetitive exercises. This is often seen in sports teams where all the players do not recover to their full potential. So, due to this reason, after a personal problem, when I spoke to my physiotherapist and a couple of other physiotherapists, they saw that continuous motivation as well as a lack of interest in patients lead to less recovery time and often no recovery in most cases. So, we try to provide a tool for physiotherapists which can bring about interactive experiences for their patients so that they could exercise, they could also monitor their data, as well as this could be shared between the orthopedic surgeon who's almost common and the physiotherapist and help in basically long-term recovery.
So I'm Ananya and I'm the founder of Smart Chakra. These are my co-founders, Rakesh and Manjunath. So we are building a smart and unique tire management system for vehicles, which automatically inflate and deflate a tire whenever there's a drop or rise in tire pressure. Our longer vision is to be able to make any vehicle that moves smart and safe. So we're trying to build products that help women safely and smart. That's this.
Interesting.
Hello sir, I'm Akshay and this is Kiran and Akshay. We are the co-founders of Zero. So basically we are building on decentralized finance. So we are building a decentralized application to provide financial services like lending and borrowing, but on undercollateralized and zero collateral loans. And we are also integrating the credit aviation through NFTs. Basically we are on in DeFi, lending and borrowing space.
Just next one. Okay. Friends, I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. And thanks a ton again. For great words. You need to pay the consulting fee.
No. I'm going to joke. So, wish you all the best. And let's see, I can keep talking. Right? So, it is either my greatest strength or my greatest weakness. Wish you all the best.